everybody, and welcome to another episode of Inside SSP. We took a brief break to
5-month break,
open an entire another gym, so it's not like we've been doing nothing. But we are excited to be back and to dive into some kind of new topics that we haven't talked about before. So the first thing you probably noticed is that it is not Chris talking. You got Natalie here on the MC, and we are here. It's Natalie and Allie, and then we have brought on a special guest. Our full-time coach and registered dietitian, Britt, is here with us. Yeah. How you doing, Britt? Welcome to the podcast.
I am good. Thanks for having me. It's
Yeah.
good to be here. It's awesome to be here.
Our first real guest.
Our first interview, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. And, you know, I know a thing or two about nutrition, but really the three of us are here to talk about it. And I'm here to pick the wonderful big brains of our nutrition coach, Allie, and our RD, Britt, on, drumroll, we're going to talk about carbs. Carbohydrates.
Carbs.
We love them.
We love them.
You're afraid of them? No. No. So I'm gonna let you guys jump in. Why did we want to talk about carbohydrates on have a whole podcast literally just dedicated to carbs?
Yeah. I guess I'll start. Britt and I are running a nutrition program right now called 2 for 2. We have about a dozen people in it, and we are trying to change people's body composition. They're trying to drop 2% body fat, replace it with 2 pounds of muscle. We have given people carbohydrate, actually that's not true. We've given them calorie and protein goals, and subsequently we've given them fat and carbohydrate goals as well. And we've had a lot of people come up to us and say, man, I hit my protein goal, so easy to hit it, but I'm way under calories and way under carbs. Like, is that okay? And so we kind of just wanted to talk about it because we've had people that are not in 2 for 2 also say, they'll come up to us and say, oh, I'm trying to lose weight and I'm really staying away from carbs, so I'm just eating really low carb. Yeah, we just kind of wanted to give you facts about carbohydrates that you might not know and why they're good for you, and to please not be scared of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think you mentioned like not hitting calorie goals. People often undereat. In fact, people are surprised at the amount of calories they need for their active lifestyle.
Yeah.
And they downplay their active lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then I think another thing is that carbohydrates, they've fallen in and out of fad, right? You've got the Atkins, but then, you know, you had the raw food diet and the vegan diet, and carbohydrates weren't necessarily demonized during that time. And now you've got the ketogenic diet that's, all in favor. And so carbs again, once again are demonized. And so it's just, they fall in and out of vogue when the truth is really what we should be focusing on is balance. Balance and fueling with, foundational foods, and then, having balance and adding in some fun foods as well.
I love it. That's perfect. Okay, so we're gonna start with a little bit of like the science side, which I think our girl Britt is gonna spearhead for us. But Britt, why don't you just talk a little bit about like what are carbohydrates? Why are they necessary? What purpose do they serve, like in our kind of metabolism and daily energy needs? And you can explain it kind of the same way you would explain to like an LN client. Give us like a little insight. If you had a client come in and say, hey, but why do I need all these? Like, why do I need 150, 200 grams of carbs?
Yeah. So carbohydrates are a macronutrient, which by definition, it's one of the nutrients in which your body uses in a large amount, macro, right? The way I always understood it too was that it's a nutrient that has a caloric value, right? Protein has a caloric value, fat has a caloric value, so do carbohydrates. Carbohydrates primarily serve to provide the body with energy. Carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, which is the body's preferred source of fuel. In fact, even during times of prolonged starvation, the brain still needs glucose. But on a regular day-to-day basis, they provide us energy, and they also are stored then in the muscle and the liver as glycogen, which then serves to provide the muscles with nutrients during bouts of energy. So if you're going low carb and you're depleting your glycogen stores, so to speak, then you're gonna bonk, and then you're not going to be able to progress as an athlete. And so they're important for individuals who are active, those who are, you know, in and out of the gym. You need those carbohydrates to be able to remain active and make gains in the gym. People think of protein as you know, the food that provides those gains, but truthfully carbohydrates are part of that as well. Carbohydrates are also fiber filled, and fiber is so important for the gut. We're learning so much about the gut, and there's so much that we don't know. But carbohydrates are really those the source of that fiber. No one ever, you know, thinks of a big steak as a really good source of fiber.
It's really gonna get things moving.
Yeah,
It's like the complete opposite sometimes.
And so a lot of carbohydrates are fiber filled, and you need that fiber, and it's shown to be beneficial for health over the long term. I think another thing that, and maybe we'll get into this more, people think of like, I think there's a bias in asking you both this question, but name a carb.
Apple.
Rice.
Okay, so like, yes, those are great. Sometimes people are like pizza, ice cream, you know, Sour Patch Kids, and that's true. Those are carbohydrates. And they should, you know, if you enjoy them, they should be included in your diet. But when I'm talking about encouraging people to eat carbohydrates, it's from, you know, whole, less processed sources as the foundation. And so your whole grains, your beans, your legumes, you know.
We just talked about that.
Fruit, starchy vegetables, even non-starchy vegetables have a little bit of carbohydrates. That should not be your primary source, but and then, you know, in moderation, things like, you know, cookies, ice cream, pizza, enjoy the heck out of those. They provide you energy as well. So
I almost feel like I wish that people would say, I'm trying to cut down on sweets or like saturated fats, instead of, oh, I'm trying to eat low carb. Because what maybe they do mean is less cookies, cake, ice cream, whatever. But it's like, so if you cut down on those, but you are up in your sweet potatoes, your legumes, your leafy greens, that's a whole different story.
And maybe for them, it is all about like, it's easier to just like take it all out. Versus like learning how to be comfortable in the in-between. It's really hard.
Yeah, that's true.
But
I like what you said too. Britt mentioned the word bonk or bonking, which basically is just when you're working out, whether you're on a run or a hike or you're doing a class or something like that, and all of a sudden you start to feel really icky and gross, maybe like you're gonna pass out, maybe like you're gonna puke. And generally what that is caused by is a drop in your blood sugar. So like the glucose, your body does not have enough glucose to support the activity that you're doing, especially if you don't have it stored, right? Because you haven't been eating it. And then you feel like crap during your workouts. And I find this a lot with people who are my like PM workout people, my like after work, because the last time they ate was lunch. And lunch was probably a salad and grilled chicken. So last time they had carbohydrates was 8 a.m. And then they're like, man, I never have any energy. I feel like shit when I work out. I like feel super weak all the time and exhausted, and I have to drag my ass to the gym and over caffeinate and take pre-workout at 6 p.m. even though I'm trying to go to bed at 9. And when really, let's have a bagel in the afternoon. Like, let's build in some more carbohydrates, because like Britt said, when you're working out, like that is the preferred fuel source for your body.
We just talked about this. We did a post on Instagram, 2 weeks ago, where you talked about breakfast. You know, people always come up and say, hey, should I eat breakfast before a workout? Every coach here will tell you yes. I know some people aren't hungry in the morning. I'm one of those people. But if you are going to work out and you want to make those gains, you got to eat some carbs too. Right? Or what if, kind of like what Natalie just said, what if you had dinner at 6 p.m. and it was a salad grilled chicken? You wake up, you try to work out at 7, 8 a.m. with nothing. When's the last time you had carbs? 24 hours ago? It's not going to go great.
And I think talking about afternoon exercisers, this is just a blanketed recommendation I have, and when I work with anyone, I notice a lot of people, it's like they eat breakfast and then they eat lunch, or they may skip breakfast, but they're always eating lunch, and then they go like 7-8
Yeah.
hours
Yes.
without eating.
Yeah.
With the workout on top of it.
I don't even work out in between lunch and
Stresses
dinner.
me out.
You need like have a little something
Yeah.
and make it balanced. You
Yeah.
have a little protein and a little carb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think Allie really hit on something important, which is that a lot of times when people think of, or like carbs get a bad rap because everyone's like, oh, carbs are very high calorie, carbs are very high calorie density, right? Which is just like the volume of food you're getting for the amount of energy that your body is getting. When, sure, there are lots of different kinds of carbs, and there are some kinds of carbs that are high calorie density. Not that high calorie density is a bad thing at all.
Right.
It's just a thing. There are foods that are lower calorie density, there's super high calorie density. But like when people are like, oh, I went low carb and I lost a bunch of weight,
That's it.
and they're like, so it clearly works for me. What they did was they took out a lot of those higher calorie and higher fat foods, like the donuts and the dessert and the pizza, and not that any of those things cannot fit in a diet. They absolutely can. All three of us eat those things. But the carbs were not, it was not the carbs' fault. Or it was not the cutting out of carbs that resulted in the weight loss. It was the lower overall energy intake. And the fact that you probably filled those food, or like those spots, those energy needs with things that like have more fiber, have more micronutrients, have more like health benefiting parts to them.
I'm just so glad you said that, because most people that sit in front of me that say they used to cut carbs and they lost weight, or like I'll ask why, and they're like, I just heard that you were supposed to eat low carb. We're like, well, I lost weight, but did they lose muscle? Did they lose what? We don't know, or maybe they know, but generally they don't know. And like carbs can hold a lot of water in your body, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
What I know it to be is 4 grams of water per every carb. I don't know if that's.
I don't know if that's the truth, but I know like when we talk about, I think when you're talking about calorie dense foods, it's like a gummy, for example, versus like a sweet potato.
Mm-hmm.
Like 5 gummies is probably, don't quote me on this, but 4 Starbursts is the equivalent to a medium sweet potato.
Absolutely is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Allie's
Yeah.
the one. Allie
Like
knows
100
so
calories here or
much.
there. Yeah.
But it, like, I could give you one food and you'd be like, it has this many calories, this many carbs.
You could do it.
But yeah, so like, but the density of that food, the Starbursts are going to be denser. But fat, grams or calories per gram, it's 9 calories per gram versus carbs, which are 4.
Yeah.
So obviously, like you mentioned fad diets earlier, Britt, and how things like come in and out of fashion or whatever. And, you know, it's easy for us, we have a very high, I would say, like level of understanding of nutrition between the 3 of us to know and not have fear of these foods, because we know how certain foods serve our bodies in different ways. When you have somebody come to you and they're like, I don't want to eat this many carbs because I know I'm going to gain weight. Or, you know, I've been on keto, the ketogenic diet, and it really works for me.
Yeah.
How do you like navigate that conversation with a client or a member of our gym?
It's a good question. I mean, everyone is different, and I kind of meet them where they're at and try to just provide as much education as they're open to. So a lot of, I mean, that comes with a lot of MI, motivational interviewing, you know, tell me how it works for you. You know, someone will say, well, you know, for the last 3 weeks, I mean, yeah, I had that, you know, big binge fest last Friday, but prior to that, 3 weeks prior, I was doing really good. You know, define good. What does good look like? Tell me, you know, but oftentimes what I will see with people is they follow this rigid structured diet for X amount of time, and then there's this big binge, and then they try to get quote unquote back on track.
Yep.
And then, you know, and after a while, it's the F it diet. They're like, I'm done.
Yeah.
This, like, and then they end up just like gorging themselves on foods that they, you know, restricted during periods of like rigidity.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's a very complex question. I feel like my first thought was to reverse diet. I know we use that a lot. I don't like the word diet, but diet just means whatever you're intaking, right? It means the food that you're eating. not necessarily on a diet, but same way where somebody comes to you, we give them a calorie goal of X amount of calories and they go, oh my God, I can't eat that many calories. I've only eaten this amount of calories. Well, I would reverse diet them, right? So you, okay, what are you eating for this week? Let's say it's, X amount of calories. All right, let's increase that by 150, 200 each week. Add an avocado, right? Add a half avocado, things like that. So same way in the carb department, I would do the same thing. I'd track them, be like, oh, you're only eating 100. I want you to get to 200. Let's add an apple. There's 30 carbs, right? So you kind of do that slowly so then they can get more comfortable. And oh my gosh, one of my favorite things is when we do have people eating more calories and more carbs, I swear 9 out of 10 times they'll come back to me and say, I just have so much more energy. I just feel better. My workouts feel better. I feel stronger.
Yeah. And that's
I
just
don't
the
know.
best feeling.
It is the best feeling. You're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, you're fueling for your body and you're feeling better. Like, I don't know. It's very cool.
It is cool. No, and I think you, never mind, I don't know what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I literally completely lost my train of thought there. Completely. Britt mentioned protein earlier.
I was
And
gonna
everybody
say,
is
yeah.
like, you go to the gym
Yep.
and then you hit your protein shake
Yep.
and then you go and you eat a steak and that's how you get the gains, bro. With like
And then you
whole
make
milk.
your, oh yeah.
Anyway. And you know what's interesting is in my master's we did a lot of listening to like current research publications or like just kind of where the like my master's degree was very geared at training athletes and where kind of the strength and conditioning world is. And most of the dietitians for D1 athletes are not worried about their athletes getting in enough protein. They're worried about their athletes getting in enough carbs.
See.
Period, point.
Yeah.
So I don't care who handles this question, whoever wants to, but like obviously they both serve a purpose, but as far as specifically like body recomposition, where is protein helping, where is carbs helping, why do we need both?
Okay, so going back to the science of it, protein's obviously important for muscle growth and for muscle repair. But first of all, you need energy in the gym, like we talked about. And the other thing is that glycogen can be muscle sparing, right? When you have that, so when I see this a lot of times in myself with running, but I think also just with any athlete, I wish I could go and like fact check myself, but I'm pretty sure this is the accurate case. When you are low in blood sugar, right? Like you're fueling, you've hit a place where the fuel that you just took in is gone, right? Usually that's like after an hour of running or like after an hour of working out. You do require more carbohydrates, and that's when that glycogen breakdown can take place. And it's muscle sparing because only protein and carbohydrates can serve to provide ATP, like that, and fuel that energy process. Fat can't. And so therefore, when you're breaking down that glycogen, you're preventing your body from breaking down its own muscle, eating its own muscle. And so eating enough carbohydrates to A, create those glycogen stores, and then B, to give yourself enough energy to fuel your workout so that then you go what you just ate to then your glycogen stores before your body then breaks down that muscle. That's the way that you spare your muscle. Now, at some point, your body will break down a little bit of muscle, so protein's still important. You want to get in an adequate amount of protein, not, a protein steak or a protein shake and steak and milk all at once. But, they're both definitely important for athletes, but I think it's because we've demonized carbs so much that, we emphasize protein.
So if you don't have that carb source, glycogen stored up, you might start to eat your muscle.
Yeah, use your muscle.
Use your muscle as, right, and we don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me also about, stealing your job, what too much protein can do? Because again, we're running 2 for 2, right? We give people their protein goals. And we actually, this is our second time running it, and we've given people goals that say no more than X amount of protein. So many people have come back and say, oh, why can't I eat over this amount of protein? So too much protein can be a little bit detrimental. Yeah.
And I have definitely filtered through the research. We just don't know,
Sure.
right? So there is older research that says, you know, too much protein is hard on the kidneys, because what happens is protein breaks down, and there's this whole deamination process, and then you pee out urea, and that puts a lot of pressure on the kidneys. I have read some research that says for people with healthy kidneys, that's not necessarily the case.
Sure.
But if you are at a predisposition to renal disease,
Right.
you don't really know until the stages increase. So stage 3, stage 4, stage 5. The other thing is, it's just wasteful. You know, it can be wasteful. That whole deamination process, when your body meets its protein needs, how do I say this? You need a good balance, and too much protein at any one time can be wasteful, right? Your body doesn't use it; it excretes it out, exactly. And so, in textbooks, the recommendation is for people who are athletes, people who are regularly exercising. It's anywhere between like 1.2 to 1.6 grams per day, but there is new research coming out that supports up to about 2 grams per kilogram, which is about 90%
of your body weight.
Yeah, in grams.
Yeah.
In grams.
Which is what we did for 2 for 2.
So for like 120 or 140 pound person,
150 pounds, 135 protein,
There you
no
go.
more than that.
Yeah, pretty much. And that there are different recommendations based on like your goals and
For
things
sure.
like that, right? But I think the bigger point, and I think especially for the context of this conversation, is if your macros are set so your protein is 150 and you're blowing it out to 200 grams of protein, you're likely not getting in the healthy fats that you need for your brain function, your hormone function, if you have a menstrual cycle, for your menstrual function, like all of this stuff.
That's
And
why
then
we're
also, that's why you're not getting the carbs that you're supposed to be
Yeah.
getting, and why you probably feel like dog shit.
Yeah.
For lack of a more
Technical
glamorous
term,
way
yeah.
to say that. But like there has to be room for all 3 macronutrients to fit. And so if you're like, okay, but I'm gonna eat 200 grams of protein a day, well, yeah, at the expense of what?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna add in here something that is not about protein and not about carbs at all. I was talking with a friend the other day who's currently living with, people. An individual is putting butter in their coffee and they're saying, gotta get in my healthy fats. That is not healthy. Like,
Oh, no.
So sometimes too, like,
Is that keto drink?
yeah, yes, that's a lot of saturated fat in one drink. Like, talk about healthy fats, we're talking about nuts, seeds, plant oils, olive oil,
Fish.
avocados, fish, yeah.
For butter, but
Yeah, but that's not a healthy
yeah.
thing to do. And so that's another thing people will do is replace their carbohydrate needs with fat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like what keto is all about.
Train their body to run on fat. I don't mean to quote, but
Yeah.
how long?
So if you had to like wrap up your like general carbohydrate guideline for people into, and this is gonna be hard for Britt especially, I think Allie's gonna crush it, into like 1 or 2 sentences, like 2 main points, like here's what I need to know about, or your biggest piece of advice on how to incorporate healthier carbohydrates. What's your like takeaway for listeners right now?
Carbs are good, okay?
Big sign. We love carbs.
Okay.
We love carbs.
From my already.
Carbs are good, okay? I thought that was like a teacher from South Park. He'd say, drugs are bad, okay?
Drugs are bad, carbs are good. We're done. We're done here.
That's it.
We're done here.
Nothing to add. Mic drop, Allie.
Learning how to navigate balance is really hard, and eating adequate amounts of carbs, protein and fat is part of navigating that balance. Okay.
I think we never went over the macro breakdown. So I guess really fast, Britt and I, or everybody at SSP will always talk to members about a balanced diet. Like you just said, balance to us means, correct me if I'm wrong, 40 to 50% carbohydrates, 20 to 30% fat, also 20 to 30% protein, depending on goals. Generally it's a 20, 30, 50 split, and we can get into that later. But, so I would say just, tracking, making sure it's about 40 to 50% of balanced carbs. Yes, and those donuts and those pizza, those things can fit in there. Wouldn't, necessarily call that, well, those are not your carbs that you're gonna.
It's
No,
a
it's a fun food, not a foundational food, like Britt says.
Yeah, and just a little bit higher for those endurance people.
Oh,
so
sure.
Up to 65.
Oh, sure.
It's individual.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So if people are like, oh, I should eat more carbs, 30% is it's gonna be too low.
Yeah.
For what we're doing in this gym, right? For endurance athletes, or lifting weights and wanting to repair your muscles and, make your gains that you want to make.
I think it's hard sometimes for people to listen to this type of nutrition advice because it feels both too simple and too complicated.
Oh, sure.
Right? Like everybody wants just an answer of like, how do I lose weight? How do I look like that person on social media? How do I get a Kim Kardashian butt? Like, and the reality is the answers live in some nuance and involve a little bit of everything, like we have kind of touched on. It's like impossible to even talk about carbohydrates without talking about fats and proteins for us.
Yeah.
So we hope that this episode was helpful and not more confusing. But I think my general piece of like nutrition advice for people is like anyone or anything that tells you to cut out entire food groups, unless you have some sort of dietary allergy or other medical need that would require that, is just cognitively should raise red flags. Like you should ask questions, you should get a second opinion, you should do those kinds of things, because the reality is that like generally speaking, our bodies operate best on a balance of all of these things. And finding out what your balance looks like versus what Britt's balance looks like versus what my balance looks like depends on a lot of things. But anything that says you can have absolutely none of X, like I said, asterisk, medical conditions, allergy, is probably somebody who's trying to sell you something, or who doesn't have your best interest at heart, or who just isn't educated enough to be giving the advice that they're giving. So, if you guys listen to this podcast and you have more questions about carbs, please hit us up on Instagram. We offer nutrition consultations with the lovely Britt and Allie, and we hope you guys learned something today. Let us know what you want to hear about next. Oh, and the last thing I was going to say is if you have not listened to our recovery episode, you should go listen to that. It's a very good either intro or outro to all the things that we just talked about, because we sort of briefly touched on nutrition in that one. But a lot of this and a lot of what Britt was talking about with muscle sparing has to do with recovery. So go listen to that if you haven't already.
Beautiful. See you later.
Thanks, love you, bye. Say it back.